Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Hello, education lovers. So happy to have you on the program this week. Welcome to Big Ideas in Education. I'm Ryan Kairalla from Doral College, and joining me this week is Mike Hernandez from Academica. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Ryan. It's been a while. Long time no see.
Good to see you on the program, my man. I need more Mike Hernandez in my life. Every time we have you on Big Ideas in Education, you fill a very important tech vacancy for us. Me and Sarah Phi, we like to think we have our skill sets in education, but we have a huge blind spot when it comes to technical resources, tech education, and just bringing more tech know-how into education services. And so you're our go-to for that. Happy to have you here this week.
I'm always very grateful to be on, Ryan. Thank you for having me on. And you guys have been doing really well. I've been listening to the shows, and you guys have been holding down the fort really well. So kudos to you guys.
Well, let's get this party started with you. What story do you have for us this week?
Yeah. So, it's the summer, and I'm pretty sure that we're all over what happened last year and all of the big transitions that we had to deal with. And we're now at this point where we're kind of recouping our breath and looking forward towards the next year. And with that said, I know that teachers are always looking to improve their curriculum. They're always trying to add new things. And going around full circle, I've had a lot of teachers reach out to me and say, "Hey, Mike, I know you know about cybersecurity, but where do I start with cybersecurity if I want to include it in my classroom? There's so many things, it's so nebulous, I don't know where to start with this whole thing because I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but I want to bring cybersecurity to my classroom to start getting my students more adept in that." Well, I did some old research, and I guess I'll just kind of spoil the party here. Today's big idea is brought to you by Michael Hernandez.
We love the big ideas that come from you. That's great.
There's no reference today. So what I've learned is there's a great organization called cyber.org. If you go to cyber.org, this website has tons and tons of information that is so useful for educators and for students. It's really useful all around. But I just want to kind of provide just some quick highlights so that way teachers can get an idea of what they're really looking at when they go to cyber.org. So the first thing that they offer is they actually have a pretty vast amount of curricula already available for free. This curricula is highly organized. It's set by grade levels and by level of difficulty. And basically, it's available to all K-12 educators. All you have to do is sign up with your school info, your school email, and within about 3 days or so, you'll get a confirmation, and you'll get access to all of that really amazing curriculum. The other thing that's really cool that I like about cyber.org is that there are events that other organizations have created, and cyber.org does a really great job of putting it all in one place for you to be able to find everything that's going on. A good example of what I'm talking about is there is actually a cybersecurity fundamentals virtual workshop happening from July 20th to the 21st. And this is basically a free event that anybody can attend to, and they can learn the basics and fundamentals of cybersecurity, learning the lingo, as they say. The other thing that I personally am very passionate about is what they call capture the flag competitions. This is essentially kind of like the Olympics when it comes to cybersecurity people. What a capture the flag essentially means is there are these very intricate kind of cybersecurity type of puzzles that you need to kind of find a way to break into the server or break into the program, and you're looking for a very unique string of characters and numbers, aka the flag. When you can find that flag, you get a point for your team.
Well, that
And
sounds
so,
fun.
oh yeah, it's tons of fun, and you have to really think outside of the box and really use the teammates that you're with and all of the different skill sets that they have in order to find that solution. So I think, like, to me, capture the flag competitions are really what it's all about when it comes to getting excited about cybersecurity. And lastly, of course, the last thing I kind of wanted to just highlight as well is this also has a very basic rubric for you to be able to understand what type of careers are available in cybersecurity, including the median salary range and the expected job growth, along with what type of industry required certifications would that type of career need. So this is kind of your one-stop shop to really start understanding, okay, what is this cybersecurity field and how can I prepare my students to be set up to actually make a big splash? And that's really my big idea to bring to the show, Ryan. What do you think?
Well, it is a big idea, and boy, is the timing on it perfect. We just had that huge news story not that long ago about a whole bunch of companies getting hacked. So the demand for these kind of cybersecurity professionals is already big, and it's only going to get bigger as this generation of students starts to graduate. So I love what cyber.org is doing here. I've been checking out the website from before the show. I love the fact that they are emphasizing providing resources to teachers so that they feel capable of leading instruction in these concepts. I love that it's K-12, as you were saying there as well. That's interesting to me. I mean, out of curiosity, Mike, I know you've perused these resources a bit. What does cyber education look like in the very early grades? Like, what are we teaching kindergartners and first graders to get them started at such a young age?
That's actually a very, very good question, Ryan. So, what do kids need to learn in terms of getting into cybersecurity at a young age? Well, there's so many things that come into cybersecurity. It really gets into, well, what do you want to do in cybersecurity? And being honest here, Ryan, that's such a hard question to ask a kid. And it goes back to, okay, kids don't really know what they necessarily are going to finally fall into, right? So with what cyber.org really does is that it kind of starts breaking down a lot of the very large concepts into little bite-sized concepts that you can actually, take on a little bit at a time. Uh, just to kind of give a better, clearer answer on it altogether, what kids start learning when they want to actually start getting into cybersecurity is it's a form of coding, but the type of coding that is required for this, it's more about talking to the computer. If we remember circa mid 80s and even before then, before the Macintosh came out, in order for you to talk to the computer, you had a big black screen and a little blinking dot, and you had to write some characters and hit the enter button. Remember that?
You take me
Well,
back, yeah.
it never went out of style. So that is in itself, when you learn a type of language called Bash, which is the born again shell, which is basically what pretty much every computer that's not Windows uses. That is a form of learning cybersecurity, because then you're able to actually tell the computer what to do without having to take your mouse and click on a button. Because many times, what you may want to do on a cybersecurity level, there's no button for that, or they haven't made a button for that. So
You got
how
to
are
get
you
down
going
to
to
the
do it?
roots.
You got to get down to the roots. So learning Bash, learning even PowerShell, that in my opinion is it's kind of the basics and the beginnings. There's other ways to learn the conceptual parts of cybersecurity in terms of the theory of it. Things like the terminology and all of that. So if anything, that's probably the better base to start, is just understanding the lingo and the terminology. And then you can start getting your hands dirty with the actual learning of the operating system and how to move files from one place to the other. Because I mean, just to put a button on it, Ryan, cybersecurity is a field where, especially when you're talking about hacking and you know and cyber defense and all of that. One professor of mine always told me, they said, you know, learning how to hack is like learning how to build a house, because learning how to hack, essentially you're trying to rob the house, but how can you rob the house if you don't know how it's built? You know, so before you could even get into that, you have to, you know, put your dues in and learn of your entire environment, so that way you can understand where the vulnerabilities are. And if you're on the good side, you're either patching that, or if you're on the bad side, well, not bad side, but you know what I mean, like the ethical hacking side, you are exploiting that, and then you're telling the company that you're working for, hey, this is something that I was able to break into. Maybe we should look into patching that.
Well, that's why I like cyber.org's approach here, is because it understands that learning cybersecurity is a lifelong endeavor. It's comprehensive, and so you need K-12 resources. You need to make sure that teachers across the curriculum are empowered, that you have, you know, a life's worth of educational resources all in one place to really get us to a point where we can really solve this cyber workforce shortage. And so all of this is just at cyber.org. Anybody can check this out. That's so cool.
It is. And just one thing I wanted to add as well for the teachers specifically, there is professional development here as well. I mean, I feel and I empathize with teachers who say, Mike, I love this new wave that's happening, but I'm behind. So how can I teach what I don't know? Totally get it. Cyber.org actually has a professional development tab where you can actually look into different workshops to better bolster what you know, and that way you can be the guide at your classroom, and the students can actually absolutely just astound you with the things that they're able to do while you're shepherding them along.
Man, I'm so excited for this. I'm going to check this out. We're going to put the link in the show description, cyber.org. Man, what a great resource. Great find, Mike. I got a story for you here.
Okay.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume, by virtue of all the coding you do, the computer knowledge you have, you've probably handled a math class without too much trouble in your day. You probably can do a little bit of math, I'm guessing.
You know, I'm not a mathematician. You know, you got to put in the hard work, but yeah, absolutely. You know, you have to know how to kind of put one and one together, so to speak. So,
well, then you might appreciate this story and the fact of how it underscores just a greater debate that we're having in math education. Love to get your insight on it. So a little bit of background. A common trend that we're seeing in math education in recent years is this idea of moving away from math as memorization and drilling and more towards a cultivating deeper problem-solving skills, cultivating critical thinking. And that's kind of where things have been headed lately. But at least one prominent educator, Mike, is mounting a defense of memorization in math. In a recent editorial in EdWeek, Rick Hess gave his summary of the current discourse, noting, quote, many math reformers seem to disdain memorization in favor of cultivating, quote, deeper understanding. The prevailing belief in belief in current math reform circles is that drilling kills the soul and makes students hate math, and that memorizing the facts obscures understanding. He goes on to say, unfortunately, this approach ignores the fact that there are some things in math that need to be memorized and drilled, such as addition and multiplication facts. Repetitive practice lies at the heart of mastery of almost every discipline, and mathematics is no exception. No sensible person would suggest eliminating drills from sports, music, or dance. De-emphasize skill and memorization, and you take away the child's primary scaffold for understanding. And so that's the quote. Dr. Hess is particularly critical of recent trends in math instruction where we're having teachers give students open-ended problems without prior instruction in an effort to try to build those students' inherent problem-solving techniques. Dr. Hess contends that a focus on building students' problem-solving skills without having them memorize the basic concepts will leave students, quote, frustrated, confused, and feeling as if they are not good at math. And so, as a math aficionado yourself, Michael, I have my own thoughts on this because I was certainly a math kid. I've taught math in schools before. What do you think about this? Where do you stand on the memorization versus build problem-solving skills debate?
Well, Ryan, I appreciate Dr. Hess's opinion, and I do concur with a lot of his thought process in there. I'll just kind of use myself as an example. For me, I personally feel that kindergarten through third grade is the most important and transformative foundation for any child's education for the rest of their entire life. And what I remember very vividly in second grade was memorizing my multiplication and division tables all the way to 12 ad nauseum.
Sure.
I think it depends on the teacher. I can understand where people may feel, quote, that their soul is being crushed, end quote, from memorization. However, Dr. Hess is right because, you know, and this it's something that happens in the computer field as well, right? We are moving so fast in society these days that I just found out handwriting courses are no longer a thing.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's no longer a thing in primary education. So I that was, you know, I know we're talking right now about math, but me, I'm left-handed, so I was very taken back to learn that we don't teach handwriting anymore in class. And the answer back was, I mean, it was pretty fair. It was, well, everything is done on computers now. All the assignments are done on computers. Everything's done on a computer. So why does anyone need to learn about handwriting or penmanship anymore? And I said, wow, you know, I mean, they're right. But going back now to the math thing, there are just certain fundamentals that without having that as your bedrock, everything else will just become so much harder. And so while talking about the theory of, you know, multiplication, or I think I understand where the article was going. There was a professor that was just giving mindless problems just to hopefully memorize the formula, if you will. In that sentiment, I am not on board with that, because that is somewhat soul crushing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What I do favor when it comes to solving problems based on formulas is you memorize the formula, the basic formula, yes. However, when it comes to problem solving, I had one professor who would give me 5 problems, then that would be it. But they would be the most difficult problems to solve. And if I actually solved it, that demonstrated to my professor that I understood the concept of the formula that they were teaching. To me, that is the more effective and better way to do it. But to put it in a nutshell, memorization in math has a place. There are teachers that do misuse it, though. So I do understand the premise of where it's coming from. But I mean, I'll never forget my multiplication tables and my and my division tables till the day I die, and that was because they got it in me early, right? So there's a balance between memorization and conceptual, especially in math. And I'll just end this and just wanted to get your thoughts on that. I've never met anyone who was ever half decent at math who just understood the theory and that was it. You actually had to put the work.
Yeah.
You know, you actually had to do the work and fail a few times. And that's the beauty of math, is that there's more than one way to get to an answer, but you need to know the basics in order to get there.
I agree. I definitely agree with Dr. Hess's basic premise that in math, as in almost any discipline, and as if in almost any skill, even outside of just traditional education, there is always a place where repetition and drilling and just straight up practice is part of it. I play guitar. Before I took any guitar class in high school, we spent the first 10 minutes of class just doing scales up and down the frets, because you just have to drill those concepts into your brain, and your brain has to get the muscle memory. And there's no way to critical thinking your way out of that. It's just a drill, and you have to do it. And math is the same way. And so you have to, knowing the timetables, understanding, basic, single, double digit addition, subtraction, multiplication, knowing basic formulas off the top of your head. Those are just necessary things. Order of operations, absolutely. And to me, where I think the line is when you're using memorization and drilling as an aid to facilitate critical thinking, that's good in math. Where I think you run into the danger is when those things replace and happen instead of the deeper critical thinking. And that can happen in math. Math is filled with a lot of tricks and mnemonic devices and things that you can memorize as a way to allow you to get around having to do the deeper understanding. And unfortunately, once you lose that deeper understanding opportunity, it can make the really hard stuff in math impossible. I think of like when I used to do math education with students, even something like, say, subtracting negative numbers. Most of the students that I worked with, even the students who were doing remedial learning, could all subtract negative numbers, even if they didn't understand what it meant, because they knew the principle of what they called keep, change, or add the opposite, where you turn the minus sign into a plus sign, you turn the next number into a negative number, and then you just add the two numbers. And every student could do that because it was a memorized trick that they had learned. But none of them could explain what it meant or why that, what was happening there in the subtracting of the number. And so when they got to more complicated concepts that, scaffolded off of that original concept, that's where they started to get lost. And so memorization is good and it's important and you have to drill and it's a necessary evil in math and anything else. But if you are relying too much on that memorization and using it as a replacement for deeper critical thinking, that's where the students can get lost when algebra shows up, when pre-calculus shows up, and you don't have those important critical thinking, problem-solving concepts learned.
You are so right, Ryan. That is really what it is. It's a domino effect, right? The domino
Especially
effect.
In math.
And I've had colleagues when I was back in school who you just see it, right? You see that they just unfortunately, and it's through no fault of their own, this is maybe because of the circumstances, they just never got that basic foundation of the multiplication, division. And so when they're just trying to even do the simple parts of a formula, they're getting caught up in just basic computation, and it's a sad thing because these are things that you look at someone else and you say, oh, how hard could it be? Actually, it's extremely hard for that person because they never even had that chance to really get it down and memorize it, right? Numbers is such a thing where if you don't understand how why 2 + 2 = 4, you're better off just memorizing why that 2 + 2 = 4, and then you figure it out later. Because math it's tough, and not everybody gets that concept. Not everyone's a critical math thinker. Some people are very artistic thinkers, and they just need to know the numbers. But guess what? You still need to know the numbers.
Yeah.
So, I'll raise my hand and I'll just say that when I was younger, I didn't want to have math as part of my life growing up, and now I'm inexorably tied to all things math.
You might not have wanted math, but math wanted you.
Math wanted me for sure, and you know what? And we get along just fine. But you want to know something else? Math and I, it's always a trying relationship. It's a relationship that I need to put in at least some bit. I can never just sit back and coast, because there's always something else to learn. So just take that as food for thought as well for all of you out there who are really struggling or who are struggling to get your kids out there. It's just like all things in life learning. Math learning is never something that you fully master. It's something that you attain and something that you cultivate, but you never fully master. And that's the beautiful thing. Math is always evolving. And you and I can come up with the same problem. You and I can have two different ways to go about it and come up with the same answer. How beautiful is that? Where else can you have that come up? You know?
It's really marvelous. You're making me, fall in love with math all over again, wanting to take another math course. Listeners, we'd love to get your perspective on this. We had 2 awesome stories this week. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can tweet at us at Academica Media with the hashtag Big Ideas in Education, because we'd love very, very much to hear from you. Mike, always a pleasure, man. Thanks for hanging out this week.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Ryan.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.